All right. Carlos normally reminds me to record. So we're now recording tonight. We are starting a new series on the book of Galatians. And so this is going to be Paul's, or Rav Shaul, Paul's epistle to the Galatians. And this is probably one of the most misunderstood books in the Bible. And actually for centuries, mainstream Christianity has used Galatians as their proof text for condemning the Judaic expressions of faith. You know, that they're saying that Paul condemns Judaism and says we shouldn't be doing the feasts and we shouldn't be doing anything Jewish. So we will be definitely refuting all of that, and we'll get into it right away. What, Ray wants to go to Romans after this? Well, I don't know. We'll have to. I have the books on that too. We could probably do it.
No, I didn't mean that. I mean it's. I agree. Galatians is numero uno. Confusing, misunderstood.
Oh, followed by Romans.
Yeah. Followed by Romans.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and get started on here. I think everybody can see the screen, and so I want to talk about during the next few weeks we're going to look at this letter, and we're going to look at it in its historical context and try to gain a better understanding of the who, the what, the when, the where, and the why the heck are we here of these 6 chapters in Galatians. And the more as I started studying on this a while back, it really interesting, especially once you get into some of the history of it, and it's a lot. It's going to be a lot of fun, I think. Let's just go ahead and I'll read this first 2 verses, because some people call in on phones and so forth. Let's see. Galatians 1:1-2. Paul, an emissary or apostle, sent not from men or by man, but by Yeshua the Messiah and God the Father, who raised him up from the dead, and all the brothers with me, to Messiah's communities in Galatia. Now, that is probably from the living, the Tree of Life version rather than King James. So, if in King James it'll have a few different words and so forth. But anyway, we're going to go on with that. The who that we got there, Paul the apostle, and he's right at the very beginning here. What is he doing? He is establishing his bona fides at the beginning, so that people will know who he is, and he's reminding them that he's an apostle that was not chosen by men, but he was actually chosen by Yeshua. You remember his experience on the road to Damascus. Yeshua appeared to him in a vision and knocked him off of his high horse. And then he, over the next 3 years, then he studied and he really came out of that as a leading apostle. He was chosen by the Lord himself rather than from men. So then the others that we're talking about here. So we'll talk a little bit more about that with Paul as we get on into the lesson. The other the who is all the brothers with me. Now he doesn't list them here in Galatians who that is, but we know from Acts 13th chapter that this was Barnabas and Simeon and Niger, Simeon, who is called Niger. In fact, I've gotten a little bit ahead of myself on some of this stuff, talking about who are the Galatians, but we'll get to that. And let me go ahead and get to that. Yeah, here they are. Here's the brothers. And that's Barnabas, Simeon, called Niger, Lucius of Cyrene, Manaen, he was a member of the court of Herod, possibly Luke the physician. We don't really know, but we assume that he was there in that one. And then John Mark, the writer of the book of Mark, he made it as far from Antioch to Perga, and then he left in Perga. So let's go back to who are the Galatians. Now, the Galatians were they're descendants of Celtic invaders that came down from the north. The Germans, they were Gauls, or there are various names for them, and they settled in this region of what is now today Turkey, and they were pretty stout warriors, and they set up basically their little kingdoms in Turkey. Nobody really messed with them all that much. The Greeks had a go at them and I guess you could say kind of conquered them, but it was one of those kind of a deals where, yeah, they agreed to disagree, but they kept their own language and a lot of their own culture. And then the Romans came in and conquered the region in 64 BCE, and then in 25 BCE, the Romans established Galatia as a province, and so that meant pretty much that they had it pretty much under control. So then we know that the province of Galatia was populated with the Greeks and Romans, and then this indigenous population of the Celts. And in fact, it was kind of interesting that these people from the Celts or Celts, however you want to say it, they said that they kept their language pretty much until the 5th century. So I mean, that was for almost 700 years in this region. They actually kept their home language from up in the I don't know, British Isles or Germany, Germanic tribes, and Northern Europe anyway. They kept those kept that language. So anyway, where is Galatia? If you look at it, it is this region here. Of course, that is what we know today as Turkey, and you see right there in the middle is that's Ankara, actually, is capital of Turkey, and so Galatia was right there in the middle of that. So that kind of gives you an idea of where Galatia was, and then I wanted to look at the Paul's first missionary journey. The reason I'm bringing all this stuff up is it kind of gives us a flavor of who these people were and who we're dealing with here. If you look over here onto the right-hand side, you've got Antioch of Syria. Now that's where Paul was teaching at the time, and of course, if you look up just to the west-northwest of Antioch, you see Tarsus. Well, that's where Paul was born and raised. He was Saul of Tarsus was how he was known. So anyway, they left from Antioch and they went down to Cyprus and Paphos and then landed in Asia Minor at the city of Perga. And in the notes that I'm going to be giving everybody, I've kind of listed a kind of a history of the area And Perga was, a pretty good sized town back during the Bronze Age. Today it's, of course, nothing but a large ancient ruins. And during the Hellenistic period, during the Greeks, it was one of the richest and most beautiful cities in the world. And it was famous for the Temple of Artemis. And then it was also the home of the Greek mathematician Apollonius. And he was a student of Archimedes, and he did a bunch of stuff with defining mathematical curves. So anyway, I put a good bit of notes in the notes that I'll be sending you on the cities, and you can read those and kind of get an idea of who we're talking about here, the various cities. And then from Perga, they went up to Antioch, another Antioch. This was Antioch in Pisidia, is the name of that town, and it's located in the southern foothills of the Sultan Mountains, and it was kind of spread out over 7 small hills, kind of like Rome. Rome is called the city on 7 hills. Well, Antioch Pisidia was sort of like that. It was founded in about 300 years, in the Seleucid dynasty, so early 3rd century BCE. And it was, it's one of those different Antiochs. There were several Antiochs that were settled in that area. And Josephus, the 1st century Jewish historian, mentions that Antiochus III ordered 2,000 Jewish families to be moved from Babylonia to certain areas in Lydia and Phrygia, because he believed they would be loyal supporters of the Seleucids, and that is from Josephus' Jewish Antiquities. And this would account for why there would be a large population of Jews in the city at this time, in these cities, because they had been ordered in there. So, but they went from up to Antioch in Pisidia, and then from there went to Iconium, down to Lystra, over to Derbe, back to Lystra and Iconium, and they just basically retraced their steps before going back into Antioch in Syria. Now, I did. Let's see. In Antioch, this is kind of where, in each one of these cities, Paul established a Messianic community. He would go into the synagogues and preach, and a lot of Gentiles would be converted, and so they started Messianic Yeshua believing congregations there. So, like I said, I'm not going to keep a whole lot of do a whole lot of stuff on each one of these cities, because I've written it down for you, and you can pick up this history. So, all right, let's go to the next one. And we already talked about the who being Paul and the brothers, and then the Messianic communities. This is who we're going to be talking about in this book of Galatia. And those are the brothers, and these are the communities that we had. And so he addressed himself to the various communities, because he just said the Messianic communities of Galatia. And so these were the 6 areas that he went to, but he specifically was talking to the Gentile believers. That's who his letters were actually targeted for. All right. Now, I wanted to bring out that in Acts, the 13th chapter. Now, if you look at this story, this particular story going to Galatia and planting these congregations it's written out in the book of Acts, and it's in the 13th and the 14th chapters. So if you were to read those two chapters, it gives you a real good history of the missionary journeys that Paul took and then what happened to him. But I'm going to read Acts 13, verses 14 and 16. But when they departed from Perga, they came to Antioch in Pisidia and went into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and sat down. And after reading of the law and the prophets, the rulers of the synagogue sent unto them, saying, Ye men and brethren, if ye have any word of exhortation for the people, say on. Then Paul stood up and beckoning with his hand said, Men of Israel, and ye that fear God, give audience. Okay, so now what is significant about this is here it is. I highlighted it for you on here, and it says brethren, and see it got brethren, men of Israel, and ye that fear God. Who are these guys? Who are the brethren? And the brethren are the Jews. This is Paul and his group of people. That would be the rulers of the synagogue would be brethren. They were the Jewish people of that synagogue, the ethnic Jews. Men of Israel. This is another word or a description of proselytes. These are men who had converted to Judaism and had gone through the final step of circumcision. And then the ye that fear God. Those are the God-fearers, the God-fearing Gentiles. These are non-Jewish people that were believers in the one God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they attached themselves basically to the synagogue, and they just couldn't go that last step to the to do the circumcision, and so that's those are the three people actually that Paul was addressing: the Jews, the proselytes who had basically done the full conversion to Judaism, and then the God-fearers who were kind of in limbo. They hadn't gone that full step. And so what happened here? If you read Acts 13 and 14, we find out that Paul went into the synagogue there at Antioch Pisidia. He taught, and he told them all about Yeshua and he went through the scriptures and the prophecies, and it's interesting that a lot of the Jewish men, a lot of the proselytes, they accepted this. They said, well, this is good, and then also they came to him. They didn't have any problem with what they were teaching, and so the problem came with the next week. They said, well, come back next week. And when they did, it said that the entire city came out. And so this overwhelmed the synagogue. And so basically what happened is that the rulers of the synagogue they were astounded. They just didn't know what to think about all of this, with all of these Gentiles piling into their synagogue. They weren't prepared for that. And then I think the full realization had dawned on them that wait a minute, they're preaching this also to the general unwashed public, not only to the proselytes, to us and the proselytes and even the God-fearers that, they haven't come to circumcision yet and would be fully accepted into the Jewish community. But they're preaching this now to all of the Gentiles, and they were just not prepared for that. And so basically they got kicked out of the synagogue and out of the city. So they had to take off, and from there then they went on to the next city, I think is Lystra. And what happened? They had the same pattern repeated. They would go to the synagogue, and we read in Romans and also in Acts where it says that Paul his practice was to go into the city, and he would preach for 3 weeks, 3 separate Shabbats on Yeshua, and then after about 3 weeks, I guess he was wearing his welcome out, and then from there he went to the Gentiles. But we saw this pattern over and over and over again, that the Jewish people saw the Gentiles as kind of a threat to their culture, because here it was, these people were accepting the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob without having to go through any kind of a formal conversion, learning the scriptures or anything like that, and they didn't have to be circumcised. And so this was so foreign to the teaching, their culture and their concept of what it was to be Jewish. And so they went through this every single city, and in some cases, I think at Lystra, they grabbed Paul and took him out, and they stoned him and left him for dead. And then when the other disciples came around, and Paul's disciples, his men came around him, says he got up, went to his feet, went back into the city, and was preaching. But then they went on to the other cities. Now, a question was asked, was this before or after Acts 15? I am of the opinion, of all the things that I've read, that this was before Acts 15. Acts 15, of course, is the Council of Jerusalem. That was when James, the brother of Yeshua, or actually his name was Yaakov, but in your, you probably grew up knowing him as James in the book in the Bible called James. Anyway, he was the head of the church or the Kahila in Jerusalem, and so he's the one that made the announcement or the ruling that the Gentiles could they would be accepted into the Messianic community without having to undergo circumcision. Now, the reason that that I think that this, and I'm just kind of parroting what the real scholars are saying on this, but it sounds right. There's several things involved with it, because we believe that Paul actually went into the southern part of Galatia, to these cities that we know that he went into that because of what's in Acts. And I think the question became, well, where were these cities actually located? Were they southern Galatia or northern Galatia? We believe it's in the south. And what years was this? This would have been in the year somewhere around 49 to 52, maybe, of CE. Current era, AD, for those of us that grew up that way. And so it would have been during that time that this book was written. So Paul went into these cities somewhere around 48 AD, and then upon his return to Antioch in Syria. That's when he wrote the book, or the letter to them. Now, I think that also looking at this letter that he sent out to the various churches there, had he already gone to Jerusalem and had gone through the ruling of the book of Acts, it seems logical to me that he would have included that verbiage and that ruling in his letter. He did not. After he had gone to the Council of Jerusalem and they had hashed it all out, then he left from there and went on his second missionary journey with letters in hand that described the ruling about the Gentiles coming to faith and coming into the community, the Messianic community. So I do believe that Paul would have mentioned this had it not been had it already been decreed in Jerusalem. That I think the Council of Jerusalem was probably around 50, somewhere between 52 to 55 A.D. And I can't remember exactly when it was. Yeah. What's that? Go ahead.
Can I jump in here a second?
Yeah.
I think we have evidence that you're correct, that it was before the Jerusalem Council Acts 15 decision was made, because in Galatians chapter 2, beginning in verse 11, we read about Kepha, Peter, fellowshipping with the non-Jewish believers, and then when some men from Jerusalem went down to Antioch and he saw them, he immediately separated himself from those non-Jewish believers that he was having table fellowship with. Because at that time, the halakha, or the rabbinic authorities, proclaimed that Jews should not sit down and eat with non-Jews. Okay? So if Acts 15, if that decision occurred before Galatians was written, would Peter have separated himself from the non-Jewish believers, having table fellowship with them? I don't think so.
I think that's another thing that points to the fact that it was not, Acts 15 had not yet occurred when Paul wrote this letter to the Galatians. So that is absolutely correct. So, and then there's other things too, just based on descriptions of the various years. Again, going to the Galatians 2, they're talking about the 14 years. So if you count these things, it gets long and involved, and you have different scholars with different opinions, but the ones that really make sense to me was that Galatians was written prior to Acts 15. So anyway, that's good. All right, let's go on with the next one. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about this reason to convert. Now, we would just, all our life we've heard this. Well, the reason to convert was so that you could be a real Jew, and they wanted, you couldn't be saved and have a place in the life to come if you didn't, if you weren't circumcised and you weren't really a Jew. But there are some, less lofty reasons that were out there also that I've come across that would have also enticed people to go ahead and do the full Monty there, as it were. Under Roman rule, let me find my notes here a little bit. Trying to find it. Under Roman rule, the Jews had immunity from this imperial cult worship, meaning that, if you remember, the Caesars all claimed to be gods, and so people would have to acknowledge that the Caesars were gods, and then they would have various worship ceremonies and so forth. And so the Jews were exempted from having to participate in those things. That was based on actually Julius Caesar, years before, 100 or so years before, was quite taken with the Jewish religion, and he respected the Jews, and so he gave them this immunity, and it stayed with them until guys like Nero and Caligula and some others rescinded it. But otherwise, if you didn't have this immunity, a guy could be executed for failure to follow all these prescribed tributes to the Caesars. Going around saying "Hail Caesar" and stuff like that. But if you had not converted to fully converted to Judaism, i.e., had the circumcision, that was what was recognized by the Roman authorities as being Jewish, that you did not enjoy that Jewish immunity to the imperial worship. And then the other part of it, there was another aspect of it, to be a part of the Jewish community. Now, as often happens in the world, boy meets girl, boy falls in love with the girl, but alas, they're from two different cultures, or races or economic strata, so we have what? Romeo and Juliet. But if a nice non-Jewish boy, and he finds this nice Jewish girl, and they want to get married, what is he to do? He can't marry her unless he converts to Judaism, including including circumcision. Ouch. So that's another reason to convert. And then looking at both of those kind of things, being a God-fearer was not a real long-term solution, unless you were, like Cornelius, the guy in the centurion in Israel. He had his own immunity. I mean, he was a soldier, bigwig, so nobody's going to go and nail him for being a God-fearer, probably because he still did his own, he would go and do the bowing or whatever he had to do with Caesar's just to keep his head on top of his shoulders. So there were some actual valid reasons to convert. Now, let's go ahead. I want to go ahead with these verses here and just kind of talk through them a bit. It says, "Grace to you and shalom from God our Father and our Lord Yeshua the Messiah." This is Galatians 1 and 3, and this salutation here, grace to you and shalom from God. This grace to you and shalom, grace and shalom, that was a standard greeting, or in fact, it was many times it was a benediction. At the end of a letter, you would say grace and shalom. So Paul, a highly educated man, he is following the standard polite writing of the day. Like it would be for us today, if we're writing a letter to someone, we say, "Dear so-and-so," which really you wonder, what in the world? That doesn't make any sense to say dear, especially when it's someone that you don't even know. And I like it in Spanish sometimes. It's a little bit better because they'll instead of saying dear so-and-so, they'll say estimado or esteemed. And I think I remember that right. Dennis, correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but I think that's what we used to have to write when I was writing Spanish letters. But at the end of your letter, you say best regards, or you'll say regards, or if you're writing to people, like a lot of times I'll say shalom or blessings, or you'll see people write in his service. Those kinds of things, they were just standard protocol for writing letters, and Paul used that standard protocol. Now, it's kind of interesting. There's just an observation, and where he separates God the Father and the Lord Yeshua. It says, "Shalom from God our Father and our Lord Yeshua the Messiah." So he's kind of breaking a little bit from the Jewish traditions, that we say, every Saturday on the Shema, that God is one, the Lord is our God, and God is one. So he's kind of getting a little bit away from that, and so it goes on to verse 4. It says, "Who gave himself," Yeshua gave himself for our sins to rescue us from this present evil age. Okay, now, who gave himself for our sins? What Paul, I believe, is doing, he's setting himself up, setting the stage, his argument. He's setting his argument up, and basically what he's saying is that he's reminding these guys that it was the sacrifice of Yeshua on the cross that established their salvation. Okay, as opposed to the argument that he's trying to make against the circumcision being the justification. That so here he's setting up his argument, and you'll see it carried out through there through the rest of the letter. And it says to rescue us from this present evil age. Of course, in the Jewish mind of the day, their present age, it was evil, and of course, certainly under the thumb of the Romans, that was particularly odious, and so they were always looking for they had two things. They had the present age, and then the Olam Haba, the age to come. And so then here he is giving authority to it. He says, according to the will of our God and Father. Okay, so he's not saying that Yeshua did this because of any man or any writings. No, this was according to God's will. This was ordained by God. So you got a problem with that? Take it up with him, because that's the authority. And again, he's laying out his argument. And so he finishes this salutation. This verses 3 to 5 here is strictly a it's just a salutation is what it is. And it says, to him, to God, be the glory forever and ever. Amen. Again, a standard protocol writing, if you're writing some kind of a religious letter. And so I think and he uses the word kurios for the Lord, and somewhere in my notes I've got some explanation on that. It goes into a kind of a long explanation of why he would use certain Greek words. Of course, then the Greek word would have to refer back to a Hebrew word, and but he does use that the Yod-Heh, the kurios is the equivalent of the Yod-Heh Vav-Heh. So which he would not have written that out in his writings to these. Certainly, he would not have written. I don't think he would have written the Yod-Heh Vav-Heh and put it on paper to send out as a letter. They held it into a high respect. So Paul, he gets right into this, and it says, "I am amazed," and this I'll just go ahead and read 6 through 10. It says, "I am amazed that you are so quickly turning away from the one who called you by the grace of Messiah to a different good news. Not that there is any other good news, but only some who are confusing you and want to distort the good news of Messiah. But even if we or an angel from heaven should announce any good news to you other than what we have proclaimed to you, let that person be cursed." Pretty strong language. As we have said before, now I repeat, anyone who proclaims to you good news other than what you received, let that person be under a curse. And then he says, and am I now trying to win people's approval or God's? Or am I trying to please people? If I were trying to please people, I would not be a servant of Messiah. So Paul, he gets right into it. I think he's being polite. Paul is being here sort of polite. He was probably thinking something like, "Hey, you dummies, what are you thinking?" And or something like that. Later on he says, "Be cursed." So Paul, he's not a stranger to strong words. In some cases, he talked about things being not worth a pile of dung. Well, how we would say that in our language, and he wrote it out like that. So Paul used strong language sometimes to get his point across. So amazed is not a strong enough word. He was probably thinking something much stronger, just disappointed, agitated, aggravated, or even stronger than that. Now I'm told that the book of Galatians, the whole book of Galatians, is written fairly roughly. It's not the smooth, polished books that Paul was capable of writing, and that he did write, for Romans, Corinthians, Ephesians, and the other books that he wrote. Because I think what it may have been that he was in an agitated state here, that these guys were trying to come around and messed up his preaching. Shocked would be another good word. It goes back to the movie I'm Shocked, just shocked, I tell you. And so that's what Paul is telling them. And he says, let them be accursed, or be under a curse. And so then he finishes it off down there. He says, so am I trying to win people's approval? If he was trying to win people's approval, he would have said, yeah, go ahead, do the circumcision. That's okay. It's no big deal. But what his fear was, and it's a very real fear, that these people would take this physical work, this medical procedure, it's a physical thing, and say that is the substitution for their justification. And the idea of circumcision was never, ever in God's plan to be a salvation, a salvific thing. It was not. It would not save you. It was a sign, and that's all it was a sign of the covenant. And so he didn't want them to get to a point. He did not want to get them to a point in Galatia where they would say, okay, now I've got the circumcision. I am now saved. Because what he tells them later on, if you take on the circumcision with that mindset, then you take on the whole law. You have basically done away with the grace that Yeshua extended to you with his sacrifice. And I had Ray is reminding us that the halakha of the day in traditional Judaism was that a Gentile had to become a Jew, meaning the circumcision, to have a place in the world to come, the afterlife. Okay, and Dennis says in the Spanish Bible version, Paul called them stupid, and that's interesting. I'm going to have to go back and make it a point to pull down my Spanish Bibles and read the scriptures in Spanish too, because sometimes those translations give you some insight that our English didn't. And I like that. I like that. He called them stupid. So I like that. Right to the point. My man Paul, he didn't mince words at all. So erases this conversion process was actually a rabbinic ritual. And so what Paul did not want to get into was the idea that some ritual was going to save you. It's like you don't walk down to the front of the church nowadays and you make a profession of faith. You say the magic words and then you're forever saved. It would be something similar to that. So and if you want to ask me about that one later on, please do. All right. Now, I wanted to also talk about in this idea of circumcision and to give you an idea of the mindset around this. I wanted to talk to you about the story. It was a very famous Jewish story, and it's actually real people. This is not a fairy tale. It was actual historical event. The guy, Izates was his name, and he was the king of, get this, Adiabene. I wanted to say that all day long. Adiabene. Now, how in the world an Italian name got over in the middle of Turkey, I have no clue. All right? So don't ask me that one. I have no clue, but I thought it was a cool name. Adiabene. And anyway, this guy, when he was a prince, his mother converted to Judaism, and then he converted to Judaism because he saw how she was just taken with it, because they at that point they were a religion called Zoroaster, and so it left a lot to be desired. So anyway, his mother, Queen Helena, converted to Judaism, and then he converted in somewhere between 30 and 36 CE when he was the prince. Well, he wanted to undergo circumcision, but his mother and his spiritual advisor, a merchant named Hananiah, was they advised against it. Now, the reason, this is important, because the reason that they said that they advised against it was because if he did that, then his subjects would say that he is taking on a foreign religion, and it could mean unrest in the country. It could mean that they would try to kill him or something like that. So Hananiah told him, says, look, it's what's in your heart that counts. You want to worship the one true God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You've already said that you've done that. And if you take on circumcision, you're liable to be killed for it. And there is a principle in Judaism that basically you do what will keep you alive. And I can't remember I'm having a senior moment here. Maybe Ray will help me with it. But there's a principle, a rabbinic principle that during the Holocaust, a lot of times the Germans would I say a lot of times. Sometimes the Germans would bring in pork to the Jews in the concentration camps for them to eat. And so what was their choice? Either eat the pork or they would be starving. So what did the rabbis tell them? It says, eat the pork because God wants you to stay alive, and this is his way of keeping you alive. So it was always to make sure that you stay alive, because kind of hard to worship the Lord if you're dead. So anyway, his advisor Hananiah says, don't do it, and so he didn't do it. Then Izates became king. His father passed away, and he got the kingdom. And so he got a different advisor, a Galilean Jew came in and convinced Izates that he needed to be circumcised, that actually by not being circumcised, he was poking his finger in the eye of God. And so this is a story. It's all recorded by Josephus, and I put the story in the notes so you guys can put that. You can read up on it if you wish. It's a neat little story, and it's actually a true story. So Izates then he called for the surgeon. They did the deed, and he was recognized as a full-fledged Jew. Well, God honored Izates throughout his entire lifetime. His kingdom there in Adiabene, actually it thrived, it expanded. He was extremely wealthy, and his mother came to live in Jerusalem, and actually they brought a lot of money into Jerusalem. There was a famine in Jerusalem at the time, and they brought in food and money to buy food, and they were a means to bless the Jewish people, and because of that, God blessed them. But the concept here that Paul, of course, would have been very familiar with this story because it was a famous story, was that you don't have to be circumcised to be justified before God. Remember that Abraham was justified by his righteousness, but his faith in God justified him long before he was ever circumcised. The circumcision was strictly a sign of the covenant, but it was not his salvation. So I think that as we're going through this book, I wanted to bring out some things. They talk about these people being Judaizers, and you'll hear them called Judaizers. I think Mark Nanos came up with the term a little bit more neutral, and I like it a little bit better. Called them influencers, and it's I will be probably using that word, influencers or Judaizers, throughout the course of the study. But they were possibly Jewish, non-Jewish believers that were the ones that were pushing for this. However, there's some evidence that they were also Jewish believers that were pushing for this. And there's also evidence that these were standard pre-believing Jews, ones that had not yet come to faith in Yeshua, and they wanted to keep the status quo. So there can be an argument made for all three positions as to who the influencers were, the Judaizers. But we do know that they followed Paul's ministry, just like a dog nipping at your heels the whole time. They followed Paul's ministry and tried to undo his gospel everywhere he went. So it was just an aggravation. Who knows? I mean, I just happened to think about it. Maybe this was Paul's thorn in the flesh. I don't think it was, but these guys were certainly a problem for him. And they were at the Council of Jerusalem in Acts 15, and they were not a small minority. I mean, this was a large group of people I don't think they were they were not an overwhelming majority that wanted to do the circumcision, but they were quite a large and vocal group that did have an influence on the affairs of the day. And like I said, it was a large body, and the Bible calls them, they were zealous for the law, and I'm sure they were. In many cases, they were probably very sincere, but it was a question of where do you go from there? If you require the circumcision, then there was the danger of making this physical act a sign of justification or a sign of salvation. And Paul and Peter both sincerely believed that this was in error, because they had seen too many Gentiles come to faith, and their faith was stamped with the seal of approval, because God gave them the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, and they spoke in different languages as the Spirit came on them. So to